All right. Hi, everybody. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Alrighty. My name is Richard Kenyon. I've been a VMUG leader for the last 4 years. I've been a vExpert for the last three, and as of this month, actually, I've been given the lovely title of regional champion for most of the East Coast. So I am one of your contacts in case anybody in the VMUG industry is not getting back to you. Feel free to shoot me some feedback. Feel free to shoot me whatever you'd like. I'd be more than happy to assist, as well as for the leaders of New Jersey. I can help you guys kind of arrange some bigger talks as well as conferences and things like that. And it's just another point of contact inside VMUG that we just rotated the 2 year service ship to at the last leader call. So I'm reachable on LinkedIn and Twitter at Richard Kenyon. And I have been in the IT industry for about 20 years at this point. I currently work for a consulting company, but most recently, I worked for a company called Synacor that was based in Buffalo, who does telecommunications, IT, services. And if you are familiar with Game of Thrones, HBO, NHL, the Olympics, or NBC, that particular company in Buffalo did all the single sign on authentication for that with the telecommunications companies. So that's where this whole story comes into play. So, as many of you probably have been for years and years, you've been on call. So, that usually means 3 a.m. wake up calls. That usually means, you're troubleshooting when you have a lack of sleep. That usually means you don't know what broke because the network information center isn't there. So, pull up, have a beer, and listen to my story of what actually happened in my environment. We went read only in our DR facility to start with. It was about 1,000 VMs. There was development, there was DR, and there was our secondary development environment for another company that we had ingested. We ran NetApps. We had two 8080s. They were all flash. And what happened was we went to do a normal DIM installation, pulled out one of the nodes, replaced the memory. And by the time we did that, we had realized the other node in the HA pair had completely crashed, sending our entire data center into read only mode because by the time it rebooted and came back up, we didn't know what happened. So that adventure is what led to this presentation. So I'm going to walk you through figuring out exactly what happened at the time it happened. What do we do next? How do we work through this? What other teams do you have to take into account when you're doing things like that? And it's just a lovely little war story that you can enjoy while you're having a beer in person. But since we can't do that anymore due to the lovely world situation that we're in, I gave you a picture of one. But Vince and I like the whiskeys instead. And I couldn't find a good picture to fit in there with beer and whiskey because this seems to be divided. So this was not at 3 a.m. It was actually at Friday at 5-ish. And I know you're not supposed to do changes on Fridays, but you know what? We've done this 100 times before. HA failover, pull out a node, put a DIM in, no big deal. Actually, it ended up being a big deal. So this is what happened. First things first is, what just broke? We realized something was wrong very quickly. And the first thing is that you start to do is go, what can you hit? Can you hit your vCenters? Can you hit your storage? Can you hit your administration boxes? Which scope did this? What's the blast radius? What DC's down? What clusters down? What clients are down? Synacor was a multi-tenant company. And in order to do that, we had to make sure, is there any revenue impacting events that are happening? So we kind of broke everything down. We kind of walked through, okay, we can hit all of our vCenters except for our DR facility. We can hit all of our storage except for our DR facility. We can't hit our admin boxes in our DR facility, which control DHCP, NAT, which control firewalls, which control, most importantly, DNS. All of that just instantly went read only. So now we know what DC we hit. Now we know what cluster we have an issue with, and now we know which clients are down. And thankfully, in this case, clients were none. There was no production issue that would cause revenue impacting events or resume generating events. There was no financial impact to this outage. And then the next thing we do, once we have figured out our 5-10 minute troubleshooting steps, what does our network operations center, which controls our company's monitoring, is we call them or they call us and go, okay, what do you see? And they saw that, because in the tale of my woe here, our network information center was actually a lot of new people. We had lost a lot of knowledge between layoffs as well as new hires coming in over the last 12 months. So they were very green. They didn't really have a handle on our environment, and they didn't really have the institutional knowledge of knowing what actually was happening. So we had to bring them along in this little journey that we're about to go on. And, as the Men in Tights clearly says, that's what they kind of saw. And when they finally saw their monitoring system, quite literally, that's what they saw. Literally every piece of their dashboard went red, just went boom, red, like, because we have 60 checks per VM. We have 1,000 VMs. You can imagine that the monitoring system that we had there just completely crashed. On top of that, because we also lost our administration cluster and our DR, the monitoring system itself had to route out back to our other production data center and then come back in. So the delay there was significant. They started freaking out, and luckily my partner and myself were able to calm them down and be like, relax. This looks bad, but it's actually not that bad. So let's work on figuring out what exactly happened, work on which exact piece broke, and bring them up to speed. And as I already had iterated, we lost one of our 2 nodes. When it rebooted, the other one obviously was down due to the memory swap, and those pictures right there are the actual ones that were the problem. So that's a AFF 8080 by NetApp, wonderful box. Node 1 rebooted due to a panic in its kernel, and we had to then let our NOC know. We then had to let all of our separate teams know where in the stack things broke. And in this instance, my team, which is the SAN team and virtualization team, controls the DC square footage, the power, the networking, physical layout of the equipment that then gets passed to our networking team. Fiber, Ethernet as that piece of the puzzle. Then you move down the block and you go storage. It's not object store, it's block and file. Cool. What servers were affected? Physical, VMware, guest hosts. And once the guests boot, my responsibility ends. So we pinpointed it very quickly as it was a physical server that was a storage server. It was block and file, and it was one of 2 nodes that just panicked for some reason. And it was not a tech hitting a power cord. It was not a tech hitting a fiber cable. It was not a tech bumping something that he shouldn't have, which most people here, I'm assuming, when you're in a data center, it does happen. You might have hit something, which is why you have change control windows and things like that. So we were very quickly being familiar enough with our environment. Okay, we have the problem. We know where it is. It's not something that is going to take us a little while to hunt down. We have a change in place. The tech we were on the phone with and said, hey, did you just bump something? And he goes, no, everything's fine. The fans kicked up for some reason. And obviously fans do that when you reboot an entire system, but lo and behold. So now we're getting down to, okay, we have the storage. Great, wonderful. What piece of the storage failed? Because at this point, we didn't actually know that. What volumes are down for the storage itself? Are the network interfaces okay? Are the HBAs okay? We already had people check DNS. And for vCenter, because it controls our entire environment, when it goes read-only, which we immediately knew happened because of the monitoring issue, you have to FSCK it, the PSC, which was ours was external, and the vCenter itself to both bring them up. That's number 1. So we went through, we asked our tech, did you touch anything? Did you break anything? Did anything fall out? He goes, nope, everything was perfectly fine. Okay, why? All right, that's why is later. Let's bring things back up so we can get to them. We FSCK'd our vCenters because now at this point, if we can get to the vCenter and we can get to the PSC, and we have our systems guys checking and rebooting their boxes, the storage is there, it's functioning. It just went read-only, which something must have rebooted, but the tech already had the node out. So why did the node that was out reboot? That's not possible. So it was the other one that rebooted. Great. Okay. Means the entire environment's down. Now you bring in teams because now you know you have a very large blast radius. So now you need to bring in an incident manager, which Synacor actually has this really cool thing where they may not be technically minded, but they're the end all be all when you have a call that's this large. So an incident manager takes questions from all of the teams on the screen, and then they take the answers and send them out to the people that are actually troubleshooting. This way, at Synacor, you can actually focus on troubleshooting instead of having to go through and go, what is this person doing? What is that person doing? What does this person see? It's a one-stop person that knows the environment well enough from an application standpoint, but not necessarily is super technical. So sometimes they're great. Sometimes they're a little trepidatious when it comes to figuring out what kind of questions to ask. And we go through, they go through and ask the NOC, what do they see? They ask the DBAs, what do they see? They start asking our systems administration, which controls our Linux systems, what do they see? Email operations, because we serve email, web applications, and one of our video asset management systems. What's going on there? They ask us, storage, what's going on, because we were in control of the change. And then they ask the networking team, hey, is there anything down on your infrastructure that you need to be part of this call? And they gather all of that information while myself and my other teammate who were in charge of the change was already absorbing and bringing in all of the other info that I had already discussed. So sometimes they're great. Sometimes they do it really quickly. Other times they look like that. And it's quite interesting when you get the people who aren't quite technology minded. They're like, I'm not real sure who to ask, but I'm going to help you guys out anyways. So that's just what sometimes they look like and sometimes they don't. I thought it was funny. So we move on. And because we have our VMs now up from vCenter, we now can see our clients and we can now see which storage piece actually failed. And on the right-hand side, the storage that is expanded in our NetApp cluster is our Opal development environment. And that set of VMs is the one that failed. The rest of the pieces that are there were fine. And you can easily tell this if you organize your storage well. A lot of people sometimes forget that you can actually do this on the storage side of vCenter. And when you have multiple different storages with multiple different clients, with multiple different names, with multiple different tenancies, it just makes it very easy in a situation like this to really quickly determine what failed and where it failed. I've seen a lot of big companies that just have a folder up top with no idea of what storage it's on. I see a lot of small companies that do the same thing. And one of the things that is a good tip if you're in that situation is really take the time to break out and put into folders what goes where. So in case something like this happens, we have the answer in seconds versus minutes or hours to figure out what actually our storage is. So all of those VMs that were about 1,000 were on those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 data stores. And just having this quick screenshot up said, cool, we know what fails, let's start fixing things. So in order to start fixing things, we need to quickly figure out when they reboot, the Linux systems need to do an FSCK. How do you do that? We know we have 1,000 machines down. We know that the administration machines are coming back up because our systems administration team is working on that. So that's DNS, NAT, DHCP, LDAP controls, all of the things that make everything function is that top level admin group. So they're working on that piece. We need to now build the rest of the infrastructure back up from the ground. And it's there, it just happens to be in a read-only state. I've done read-only issues where it's a folder of 20 or 30 VMs. You open up a few consoles with the GUI. You check and go, okay, they're all booting up fine. They're all FSCKing fine. Let the clients know that they're all up. Cool. We've never had one that was this large. So I went, if I can do it in the GUI, I'm damn sure I can do it in Power CLI. And so I quickly did a 10-minute Google search and found out that you can actually build a Power CLI, which I will show you a little bit later, the actual code, consoles with Power CLI. I didn't know I could do that until I absolutely needed it. So we brought up about 1,000 Power CLI consoles and watched them all boot at the same time. We had one of the network information monitoring systems, 40-inch TVs, and all it was just consoles for our entire environment. And we just watched them. Out of 1,000 VMs, I think maybe only 4 or 5 kind of choked when they did their FSCK. So that was a very good ratio. We fixed those to change on auto boot up instead of having it do manually, and we passed them to their separate teams and things like that. That entire process took about 4 hours from the start of the story till about getting all of the VMs booted and back to normal and handed off to the teams that now needed to go and fix their respective applications in DR. About 4 hours. One of the things I didn't mention is that as soon as that second node got its memory put back in and booted up, by the time that happened, NetApp had already called us because we had opened up a pre-maintenance ticket on their systems, and they were already watching and already had text going, hey, if anything goes wrong, we'll call you. They were on the phone during this whole process in the back going, we saw you had a secondary node reboot during an HA event. We know that's a problem. We put this as a P1 and we gave you a call to the number that we set. We put them on a physical laptop that was connected to our network. We put them on a WebEx and they said, how can we help you? And we said, we're fixing something at the moment. Our NetApps look good at the moment. Please look at the ASIPs, the core dumps, and anything else that you can while we are doing this problem. I will get back to you. So they stayed on their little remote computer for about 4 hours before I even talked to them again. By the time I got to them, they found that they actually had a bug in their system, and they found everything that we needed in order to get to them. So the timeline they were able to give us was this. And I forgot this was on a Thursday, not a Friday, but it carried into Friday because if you're on call, it tends to happen like that. So Node 2 had a DIMM replacement. We pulled Node 2 after doing a successful HA event, put the memory in the slot, slid it back in, turned it on, boom. As soon as we did that, Node 1 panicked and ended up being a bug. For some reason, there was a counter buried deep inside NetApp firmware on the version of firmware that we had with the version of disk firmware what we have. It was like 3 or 4 levels of we just happened to be on a patch that didn't have the proper fix in it. And because we went to an HA event, it immediately rebooted and dropped the rest of the VMs. So when it came back up, Node 1 had a root vol issue and it wasn't working properly. So it couldn't successfully take over after it had done the failover and give back. NetApp did all the work on their end and completely checked and maintained and did some boot flags. Everything got brought back up. All the checks were in place and the problem was solved. So through this whole thing, not only did we have NetApp working on it, all of our teams working on it, all of our storage people who were responsible with myself and somebody else, as well as executive briefing going, all your clients are fine. There's no revenue impact here. It's part of an infrastructure. You're good. You guys can go do the rest of your thing. And all of these pieces were working very well together, except for maybe the greenish network information systems that I had mentioned earlier. All in all, a great failure. We got everything that we needed, and NetApp allowed us to make a nice audit for the RCA that happened a week later. And here was what actually was the issue. There was a membership reports sent value buried deep in the cluster code that said, if this number is, above 1,000, if you do a failover, it will crash. We checked our production system, and lo and behold, we actually have this bug in production as well, but we didn't hit it because we never needed to do a failover. So if you have NetApps, if you have NetApp 9.2 still installed, I know this example is a few years old, but this is one of the things that you can go and get, and they'll fix it for you with your proper support and things like that. So what I want to do now is show you actually the code for that Power CLI. as well as a chat. We gotta bring that up. That failure chat open. There we go. So through this whole thing, we're talking in Slack. Hopefully you guys can see the font on this. I'll make it a little bigger. We are in chat doing certain things. Here's the time that it started. Here's the failover's complete. Text now starting the dim. Everything is time stamped in Slack. And you can do this constantly as you are typing up what's going on and how you're troubleshooting. So one of the things that Vince is probably familiar with is something I tend to call constant contact, is just drop a line in Slack or whatever your messaging system is every 5 or 10 minutes. Hey, I'm doing this now. Hey, I'm looking at this now. Hey, there's no change from before. And the IM that we have, the incident manager, can see that and relate it back to other teams. So this not only gives teammates good communication in a very stressful situation, even if you're not doing anything, you can help them along by going, here's what we did, here's what's going on. And it helps keep everything together and moving in a situation that really nobody wants to be in. So the IM that we had did great. I'm actually still friends with him outside. This was a learning opportunity for him. He went through all the different teams. He kept asking us questions. What happened? How's it going? We have access to vCenter now. Oh, look, our wiki is up. Look, our information systems are up for DNS, for NAT, for LDAP. You can start signing into stuff. Cool, our wiki's up for all our run books. All right, there we go. What's the status? And this can be dropped in and sent to an executive or a lawyer or an RCA or an audit, and just here, minute by minute, day by day. And since Synacor is a relatively small company, speaking from enterprises, we only have 300 employees versus 17,000. This is not that hard to set up and work. It's a little tip for when you actually have a catastrophe in the middle of the night versus 7 o'clock at night. It just helps everybody. So here's the actual logs we got on reboot. This we can send a NetApp if they hadn't called. The release we were on was 9.2P1 that had the bug in it. Perfect. And just go and go and go and go and go. And it's lovely. And one of the things that I see a lot of new IT people or even, experienced IT people don't do is just let people know what you're doing when you're doing it. And one of the things that took me about 10 minutes to do was the Power CLI code. And this will be up on my GitHub page if anybody wants it. There are two ways to pull Power CLI or remote consoles from vCenter. You can do it through Firefox or Chrome, which is the web HTML5 console, which William Lamb, everybody should know him by now at this point. You can go through, and that's I think at the very end. Yeah, here's the HTML5 version. It ended up being a little more complex than I wanted. He actually wrote a function to do it, but I put it in here in case anybody wanted to do it this way. I ended up just doing something I didn't know existed at the time, is Open VMware Console, which in the middle of a crisis, I thought I could just run it and it would open up. But for some reason, it's 20 instances at a time. So back to the organizational tip that I gave you earlier, is you can break that 20 instant limit from Power CLI's Open VMware Console is if you do your Git location folders. So having our clients broken into folders and having all of our different tool sets broken into folders, we could organizationally very quickly fire up 1,000 consoles at the same time because we had that organizational structure put into place already. So I wrote this up real quick. I ran it, and then I just ran it over and over and over again to break everything out into groups of 10 so they would fit on the network information physical monitor they had in their office at the time. So we just did, 1 through 10, 1 through 10, 1 through 10 with all of our naming conventions, and it worked perfectly. And it couldn't have went any better. So this will be up on my GitHub page as well as the presentation in case you have NetApps that you want. And that's kind of my story of when shit hits the fan and you have some tips and tricks that you can impart to other people, as well as, a real life story of stuff that went wrong. So if anybody has any questions or comments or just want to, chat about something, I'd be more than happy to, go into a little bit more detail, or that's it.